Hello, everybody, and either welcome or welcome back to my podcast. As usual, I want to remind everybody, if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. All right, so as per usual, you can tell kind of by the title what we're going to be discussing today. And that's two constitutional amendments that I think right now are kind of getting misunderstood, misconstrued, misapplied. And that is the First Amendment and the Fifth Amendment. We're going to go ahead and start with the First Amendment. And just for the sake of clarity, not that I don't think you guys don't already know the text of the First Amendment, let's go ahead and go over it. Amendment 1. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people to peacefully assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Now, there's actually a lot of rights granted to you, even in that little bit of space, but the one I want to talk about is the right to free speech. Now, 2 points that I kind of want to bring up. First off, if you've been in the libertarian sphere long enough, you've had somebody lob the argument to you that the First Amendment solely applies to Congress. And yes, thank you, we can all read. I see the part where it says Congress shall make no law. But what the First Amendment does is it sets the groundwork for, in our society, the idea that you do have free speech and that it is constitutionally protected, not only from Congress making laws against it, but just in general, that you have that right to free speech, that you have that right to freely assemble, to associate, to participate in whatever religion you want to participate in. And that not only that Congress can't make a law on it, but that it shouldn't be something that anybody should be restricting. And as far as the First Amendment itself goes, I've always maintained that it is the First Amendment for a reason. And that reason is kind of demonstrated by places like Canada and Britain, whose people don't have a neat, spiffy thing called a Bill of Rights that prevents their government from making laws restricting speech. Their governments have made laws restricting speech. So, obviously, First Amendment, beautiful thing. No, we do not need to rewrite it. We do not need to rethink it. We do not need to touch it. Leave it alone. The second point I want to make is this idea that people kind of use the idea of the First Amendment and freedom of speech kind of interchangeably. And they're really not. Like, I see people calling things a First Amendment issue that are actually a freedom of speech issue. Like saying that, I don't know, Twitter deleting your account is a First Amendment issue. No, it's not. A First Amendment issue would be something that you could actually take to court and sue somebody over. Like the Oregon gay wedding cake case. That became a First Amendment issue once a court ruled that they had to bake the cake. Because then at that point, it is the government infringing upon their freedom of religion and their freedom to associate with who they want to. And then that's when it became a First Amendment issue. Saying things like Kanye's music not being played on certain radio stations is a violation of his First Amendment rights is incorrect. That's not a violation of his First Amendment rights. That's not even a freedom of speech violation. That's just a stupid tweet. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm sure everybody's heard of Diamond and Silk by now. They had tweeted out that there was some radio station that had said that they refused, that they're just not going to play Kanye's music anymore because of Kanye doing Kanye things. And so they tweeted out that that's a violation of his First Amendment rights. And of course, everybody on Twitter had to jump up and correct them, rightfully, because no, it's not. But that's one of those things I'm talking about, where people kind of conflate the First Amendment with people's freedom of speech, which freedom of speech is a much more kind of nebulous concept, whereas First Amendment is actual like law concept. Most of what we deal with nowadays is actual freedom of speech issues, not actual First Amendment issues, because Congress is not attempting to make laws curtailing free speech, nor, well, I was about to say, nor are any city or state governments, but then I just remembered California is trying to do some fucking nonsense on that level. But as far as the kind of general broad discussion about hate speech and free speech and what isn't and isn't allowed on campus and what should and should not be allowed online or on certain social media platforms aren't, technically speaking, First Amendment issues. And that kind of leads us into the next topic, which I swear to God, I had this whole podcast workshopped out, everything laid out, notes, everything. And then the Barry Weiss New York Times Intellectual Dark Web piece hit, which, if you haven't read it, links in the show notes as per always. But yeah, this got a very interesting reaction, and actually more so than I thought it would. And first off, I would like to go ahead and just say right off the rip, if I ever get profiled by the New York Times, I want a fancy photo shoot too. Everybody made fun of the photo shoot. I want a fancy photo shoot. I want to look like a mysterious wood nymph. I want to go roll around in moss. I want to be nicely side-lit at dusk and look all wonderful and mysterious. And if I ever get profiled by the New York Times and that doesn't happen, I'm going to be very disappointed. But anyway, back to the piece. Is a piece written by Barry Weiss, which, first off, I would like to just go ahead and say, I don't know if this piece would have gotten quite as much blowback as it did if it was written by somebody other than Barry Weiss. I'm not entirely sure when she became persona non grata, but it's like there's people out there now that just kind of live to try to tear this woman down. I don't really get it. And that kind of leads into a lot of my opinions on this piece about things that I really don't get. But basically, it's a piece on the quote-unquote intellectual dark web, which is comprised of people like Dave Rubin, Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, kind of people like that. We've also got, Sam Harris. Eric Weinstein, a bunch of other people kind of profiled in this piece. But it's the idea that I'm sorry, it's funny to me that these people are being silenced by, I'm not entirely sure who, because I personally wish somebody would. I wish somebody would $70,000 to $90,000 a month worth of silence me, which those are the numbers I've seen floated around for what Jordan Peterson makes a month off of Patreon. In the piece, she actually cites that Ben Shapiro gets 15 million downloads a month of his podcast. Oh my God, somebody please shut me the fuck up like that. Please, somebody pay me 70 grand a month to shut up. Actually, don't. I'm probably the last person on earth that needs to make that much money. That would be bad. Maybe we should ratchet that down to maybe 10 grand? 10 grand. Yeah, I want to be 10 grand worth of silence a month. That's the goal. I don't even have a Patreon. I should probably do that. Anyway, getting back to this, but the whole piece is kind of, it's not laughable because I get where she was going with it. I get what she was trying to do. But the whole idea of the intellectual dark web, which, by the way, this isn't a term that she came up with. It's a term that these people came up with for themselves to kind of be like the super best friends. This is just such a bad idea. This is a really bad idea. Let me read you a bit from the piece about who is part of the intellectual dark web, or IDW, going forward. What is the IDW and who is a member of it? It's hard to explain, which is both its beauty and its danger. Most simply, it is a collection of iconoclastic thinkers, academic renegades, and media personalities who are having a rolling conversation on podcasts, YouTube, and Twitter, and in sold-out auditoriums that sound unlike anything else happening, at least publicly, in the culture right now. Feeling largely locked out of media outlets, they are rapidly building their own mass media channels. You guys can kind of see the inherent contradiction, right? Of people complaining that they're being silenced by going on their massive, massive platforms that they've built for themselves off the idea of being silenced to talk about being silenced. This is this is just so fucking dumb. I mean, honestly, it's a product of the environment that has been created, and I kind of want to talk about that in a second, but my thoughts on this piece in general is that it could have been a better piece if it had kind of gone in a different direction. instead of trying to make the argument that these people are being silenced by, I guess, society at large, by the mainstream media, but then pointing out that they have massive, massive platforms and make a shit ton of money, isn't really going to make the point that you think it's going to make. Because really the only people that are shutting any of these people down are on college campuses. And I think if the piece had kind of emphasized more on that versus trying to make it a more broader thing of these people are being silenced, that would have made for at least a little more intellectually honest piece. But that being said, campus culture has kind of been discussed to death, so I don't know how necessarily you would do this piece like that, but I feel like kind of focusing it more on the people who are trying to shut these people down versus trying to make the argument that everybody is trying to shut these people down would have been a much more cogent argument. And I mean, I don't say that to discount these people's experiences at all, especially like Brent Weinstein, Heather Hiring's kind of situation at Evergreen State, which if you don't know about the Evergreen State fiasco, go ahead, finish up this podcast, go make yourself a drink, fire up the YouTube machine, type in Evergreen State College in the search function, sit back, and wait to watch this fucking basket of insanity. I mean, it's just, it's beyond the pale what happened there. But basically, there were two professors that worked there and basically got hounded out of their jobs. I mean, they got to leave. They had to leave the state for the thought crime of pointing out that, I forget exactly what Evergreen State called it, but it was basically like the idea of a day without white people, and pointing out that that's racism and that's segregation and that's wrong and that's not diversity. And I mean, the footage that was filmed is like, these kids are literally fucking shouting in these people's faces. It's wild. It's so insane. Like, go ahead and obviously start with the Vice News Michael Moynihan interview and go from there. But it's something. And I mean, I'm not discounting that. I'm not discounting the fact that these people do go on college campuses. Like, I know Sam Harris has been shouted down. I think he was actually physically threatened at one point. I mean, Christina Hoff Sommers has had this problem. I don't even know if Ben Shapiro can get booked on a college campus anymore. Same with Dave Rubin. But that being said, being put in that position sucks. And I wouldn't wish it on anybody that I don't like. But at the end of the day, it kind of worked out okay for everybody. Like, now, because of those experiences, you have this much larger platform where you're probably making more money. You're definitely more visible. And you have more of an opportunity to speak than you did before. So I kind of have a hard time feeling bad for you, because it kind of all worked out in the end. And to kind of try to tie this back into the theme of this week's episode, nobody's free speech here is being infringed upon. You still have the right to say whatever you want, and now you have the right to say it to way more people than you did before. So it's not like you live in England where you can get thrown in jail for saying something or tweeting something or putting something on Instagram, or you live in Russia where worse things could happen to you, or like Cuba or Venezuela or anything like that, where speaking out does have actual serious consequences attached to them. Basically, your consequences, you get yelled at, but then you get this awesome, huge platform. So, I mean, it's kind of disingenuous to scream about people infringing upon your right to speech when really nobody is infringing upon your right to speech at all. If anything, and this is maybe another thing that could have been addressed in the piece, is not so much the silencing of people, but the stratification of speech that's going on, that it's acceptable to say things in this place, but not that place, and you will face consequences for saying things in this place, but not that place, and these people want to hear these thoughts, and these people want to hear that thought. That is something that could be talked about, and that is something that, I mean, I do feel like the campus speech issue is an issue. I just don't feel like it's a First Amendment issue. And obviously there's plenty of things I could say about the state of free speech on college campuses, but I mean, it's all pretty much self-evident. But I think this would have been better served by kind of going in that direction. A couple more thoughts on the whole intellectual dark web situation before I pivot to the next topic. And I'm going to go ahead and quote back here from the piece again. "People are starved for controversial opinions," said Joe Rogan, an MMA color commentator and comedian who hosts one of the most popular podcasts in the country. And they are starved for an actual conversation. I bring that up because if these are what is construed as controversial opinions, discussing the fact that there's differences in gender or biology or, I mean, other topics like race and IQ, which I fucking hate that topic, and I'll discuss more at a later date on that. But to discuss things that most people can genuinely, like, understand are truth, if that's controversial, then I actually tweeted this out the other day. Like, if you find these things controversial, don't ever hang out with, like, the small L libertarians or the ANCAPs, because we got your controversial opinions right over here. Y'all over here worried about gender differences, and we're talking about transhumanism and sex robots and demolishing the state. So, what constitutes edgy right now, at least on college campuses, is really funny when you spend your days online talking to people who actually hold honest-to-God controversial positions on things. And kind of the last point I want to make on the whole IDW situation and it being a thing, capital T thing, is that even in this piece, and I've seen it kind of discussed online and in various other places, this whole idea of who is part of the intellectual dark web and who isn't part of the ideal intellectual dark web. Sorry. But maybe that's my problem with this. That's why I think this is so ill-advised. Do we have to make this like some kind of cliquish thing where you can come sit with us, but you can't sit with us, and these people are with us, and these people are not with us, even though you think they're with us, but they're not? Like, are they going to start handing out like membership cards? Are there going to be spiffy pins involved? Like, the whole idea of trying to codify this and make it like a actual thing where there's members is just so fucking stupid to me. Like, I'm fine with people associating with each other. I mean, if they want to go on speaking tours together or basically talk amongst themselves, that's fine. I've got no problem with that. The problem I have with it is trying to like codify this movement, because then you have these questions of who's in and who's out, and then eventually, if you do that, it becomes a situation where one person's going to have to answer for another person's opinions. And if what you're really trying to pursue here is the freedom of intellectual thought and expression, making it into a club is the exact opposite of what you want to do, first of all. And second of all, the whole idea of making it into this like little group where everybody has to think the same way and speak the same way sounds an awful lot like the leftists that you claim to hate so much, because that's what they do. So maybe if you don't like it when they do it, don't turn around and do it yourself. Okay, and one more point that I want to make on the topic of free speech before I pivot over to the Fifth Amendment. Just because this is a thing that just started kind of coming to my attention today, and kind of ties, first of all, into this whole who's in, who's out of the intellectual dark web thing, and also the concept of free speech, which is apparently Candace Owen, who is a topic of is she in or is she out of the intellectual dark web, apparently now seems to think that she can sue people for libel, because it all started with, I guess, The Guardian wrote a piece labeling her as the alt-right, and she got all pissed off and threatened a libel lawsuit. And now apparently there's going to be a class action libel lawsuit, which is fucking impossible because you can't do that. But it brings back into this whole question of free speech, and you can't sue somebody for calling you a name you don't like. Like, I hope she gets competent legal counsel that tells her you can't sue somebody for libel because they called you a thing you don't like. That's not how this works. That's not how free speech works. You can't, that's not libel. That's just somebody calling you a name. Like, that whole situation, I don't know what to say about it, other than it seems real fucking snowflakey to me to threaten to sue somebody because they called you a name. So, yeah, just wanted to address that real quick. Now we're going to get to the Fifth Amendment. I promise. We're going to get there. And like I did with the First Amendment, let's start with the text of the Fifth Amendment. Amendment 5. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or other infamous crime, unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject to the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. This is another amendment where there's a lot there. It's basically your right to a trial by jury, the right to not have double jeopardy. But what we want to talk about today is the part about not being compelled to be a witness against yourself, aka pleading the Fifth. And thanks to our Cheeto-colored president, we now get to discuss pleading the Fifth, because it seems like it is getting to the point where Mueller would like to question Trump. I think it was last Saturday, I saw them release the questions allegedly that Mueller would like to ask Trump if ever given the opportunity to ask Trump. But what I have seen come out on social media and everything is this idea that if you are innocent, then you shouldn't have to plead the Fifth. Which, fuck no. Yeah, you jackwagons go talk to the police without any kind of lawyer representation, 'cause you're innocent. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Basically, here's the thing. Law enforcement, be it local cops, state cops, the feds, whoever, are not here to be your friend and exonerate you of any wrongdoing. If law enforcement wishes to speak to you, it's because they think you've done something wrong, and they would like to ask you questions, hopefully in the aim of getting you to admit that you have done something wrong. It's not a friendly exchange. This is people who are trying to jam you up on some shit, and fuck it, if you want to go talk to them, be my guest. I'm going to sit over here and laugh at you when you eventually say something that they're going to use against you in a court of law. So, don't get it twisted and think that these people are here to be your friend. They're not. And that is why that part of the Fifth Amendment exists. Because the Founding Fathers were intelligent men who could figure things out and understood that if you don't put something in place that can stop law enforcement from compelling you to testify against yourself, they will force you to testify against yourself, which, for obvious reasons, you should not have to do. So, yeah, when you go and you claim that if you're innocent, you shouldn't have to plead the Fifth, and that if you plead the Fifth, that you're guilty, is just a rank misunderstanding of what it is to be questioned by law enforcement. And that kind of leads into this whole situation. My opinions on whether if this should ever even get to this point, I'm not even entirely sure if it honestly ever will, because I don't really know if Mueller wants to ring this bell or not. But if Mueller should subpoena Trump to be questioned, should he plead the Fifth? My answer? Fuck yeah, plead the Fifth. There's nothing for you to gain from this. It's, like I said, if they're questioning you, it's because they're trying to get information from you to confirm what they either already think or know. So, no, don't fucking help somebody make a case against you. Are you nuts? No. And so that's pretty much my thoughts on that. But I know a lot of people kind of look at this in the way of, well, how does this look? And my opinion, in the court of public opinion, it's not really going to matter either way. If this does happen, he does plead the fifth, everybody who supports Trump, that is going to make the same argument that I just made, that yes, it's his constitutional right. There's nothing for him to be gained from this. There's no reason to answer these questions. And everybody who doesn't like Trump is going to look at it, like I said, as some kind of admission of guilt, which it's not. But that's how it's going to be construed. But it's not going to change anybody's opinion on Trump one way or the other. So even as far as his image is concerned, which, let's face it, that's the only thing the man cares about, there's no net positive to testifying. There's no net negative to not testifying. So, yeah, as far as that's concerned, it doesn't matter. What does matter, on the other hand, is the idea of the quote-unquote constitutional crisis that this can create, which I don't see how you start impeachment proceedings or anything like that because the man exercised his Fifth Amendment rights. You can't really nail somebody to the wall because you did what you are legally allowed to do as a U.S. citizen. Here's kind of how I can see this going down, though. Trump is not the smartest man on the planet, shall we say? And what I can see happening is him being stupid enough to be goaded into testifying and answering questions, which, again, because he's not smart, means he's probably going to end up saying something really fucking stupid that's going to get him jammed up. Like, if we go back to kind of the last time this happened was the Clinton impeachment. How that ended up happening was, again, Bill Clinton, who, say whatever you want about Bill Clinton, was actually a lawyer before he was a politician. So he knew what this was, and he still fucked it up. He still said some shit that got him hemmed up and got him stuck in an impeachment proceeding. So I don't hold out a lot of hope that Trump would be able to navigate that without doing something stupid. So that's kind of another reason I really kind of hope he either pleads the fifth or this doesn't happen, because not that I like Trump or anything, but I don't want impeachment proceedings. I damn sure don't want a President Pence. So my hope is that just none of this happens. This is all an academic navel-gazing exercise in what a president should or should not do if subpoenaed to testify, and hopefully this never becomes an actual thing that we have to worry about. One thought I did have on the topic of impeachment that did kind of strike me as funny, though, is this is kind of starting to mirror the Clinton impeachment thing, where we started out, like with Clinton, we started out with Whitewater and ended up with blowjobs in the Oval Office. As for Trump, we started out with Russia collusion. And if we end up landing on paying off a porn star, like, it really does testify to the fact that if law enforcement tries hard enough, they will find something to jam you up on, and that's just another reason to never talk to them. But on that note, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. If you made it this long, thank you. Please rate, comment, and subscribe as always. Again, you can find me on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Take care, and until next time.